it's too big.
Is that the one I gave you? Oh, no.
Oh, are we on?
We're on.
All right. Good morning.
I don't know why this every week.
It's just what it do.
Yeah.
Don't hate the thing for living its life. Our lighting is so bright this morning.
It is bright.
Nice. Ready?
Yeah. Welcome to Books We Never Read.
Except for those we have.
I'm Jason.
I'm Nicole.
And this week, our couch is further back than like, significantly further.
Is it weird?
Yeah, it's weird. I shouldn't be able to do this.
Well, anyways, this is episode 34 of Books We Never Read. And we'll be talking about the last reading section of Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. That's chapters 5.8 through the end, I think.
Something like that. That sounds right.
Yeah. You know, we hadn't thought about this before, or maybe we have, but we haven't said that out loud, but every last reading of every book is an episode of Except for Those We Have.
Wah, wah.
Because at that point, we read it.
Yeah, except for last time.
Every last
I know, I got it.
episode
Yeah. I'm just picking.
of books.
Yeah.
Anyway, before we get started, please make sure that this is what you're actually wanting to watch. We talk about what we've read as if you have also already read it. So, spoilers abound and all that jazz. We also want you to join us live every Sunday at 10 a.m. And if you are here live, please join us in the chat so that we can have more to talk about and we can see what you thought about what we read. And if you're joining us after this has already gone live, please join us in the comment box so that we can see what your thoughts were on the book, or things that we missed, or things that we just forgot to talk about. There's so much stuff after every episode. We're like, oh, we didn't talk about this thing.
Yeah.
And then someone brings it up later, and it gives us a chance to like relive that over and over again. Allison says, good morning.
Good morning. I don't care if you're reading this book 5 years after we've read it. I want to talk to you about it. So, but before we get into the book, I want to say this too, right? On this day in history, 1 year ago, we boarded a plane to a wedding where we were recommended for the first time Three Body Problem that started this whole show.
Yeah.
So we are very rapidly coming up on our year anniversary, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, my phone told me today that we were boarding a plane this time last year. So, yeah. Also, we put out another video this week. I don't know if anybody's watching. We have 6 people in here. That's crazy.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
Y'all ain't busy?
Yay!
We put up a video this week that we thought was kind of fun. We filmed it ages ago of us going through the BBC's top 100 books you should read before you die, and just kind of figuring out how many I had read specifically. If y'all enjoyed that, go over there and like it or something so that we can see how many people actually watch that. But we are talking about starting to put out more things like that, and I think we want to do an Except for Those We Have this week. We had talked about that. We'll figure it out and start delving into some other different things. So we're excited about that.
Yeah.
Not as excited about that.
Oh yeah, no.
Okay.
Very excited about
panicked.
it. Well, yeah. Peggy says we will discuss the spiders as if you're also thoroughly invested in their lives.
Mm-hmm. Look, I'm thoroughly invested in their lives. We were at a birthday party last night, and I suggested this to like everyone.
Everybody.
Just everyone.
This is the best book we've read.
Yes. We both agree. This is the best book we have read yet.
It's definitely the best of the sci-fis that we've read.
Yeah. It's the best book we've read. What do you think your second pick would be after this? I'm still putting Three Body as a series.
Westwood Drafts.
Westwood Drafts, really? Okay.
Because I still think about some elements from that. Some things still kind of just hit me right in the gut.
Yeah. I finished this book yesterday, and I think Nicole finished also yesterday, but she was in the backyard audiobooking and crying while like watering the grass.
Watering the grass.
I don't know, just boo-hooing.
Yeah. I started reading this section, after our show last Sunday, and I immediately started crying. Like there were just so many, and we say this like I'm a big crybaby, but there were so many elements that really like touched my heart.
Yeah.
and starting that off was, you know, the ants' first, you know, trip into orbit, you know, or trying to get close to orbit, and they're like little steampunk air balloons,
Yeah.
you know, and it all went terribly wrong, and just her thought process. I think it was Portia at the time. Her thought process. I get confused whether it's a Portia or a Bianca, but it was a Portia. Um, just yeah, how she was processing. This has gone wrong, but this is, you know, my one chance to get out there and do it, and she did, and
But then her Fabian sacrifices himself to save her by like mating with her and getting her to eat him. That was good. That was really good.
it was a lot.
Yeah. So one thing I really enjoy. The reason I am going to put this Three Body is incredible, just like absolutely incredible. The reason I'm going to put this above Three Body is that as far as best books go, this is something I can more easily recommend to people, right? It's not nearly as it has philosophical things, but it's focused on the narrative. And Three Body doesn't have a lot of it doesn't develop characters and the intimacy that you have to the characters in the same way that this does. And that might be a translation issue, right? Just from taking from one language to another. And so like I can't fault it for that. But because this one just like does that job, right? And you get invested in all Lane and Holston and like everybody, you know, and the spiders. So that's why I put it slightly above.
And I think this book, first of all, is more optimistic about it's about the potential for what the future can be. And not that it's going to be an easy journey, and it showed that, you know, it showed all the ship, oh my gosh. But so anyways, but this book did all of that in one book. And in Three Body, you do get amazing storytelling and this legacy of humans, but you do have to go through all three to really have a complete picture.
Yeah, sure.
I would have felt incomplete had we only read one of Three Body.
Yeah.
I feel complete having just read one of the Children of Time. I'm happy to move forward and read other ones, or to just stop here. And I even mentioned this, like I'm kind of scared to read any of the other ones because I don't want to sully the beauty that is this book.
Yeah, for sure. There's just so many cool things that like even that they talk about in Three Body, but they talk about sort of, you know, we talk about the Trisolaran technology, but they talk about it in human terms, or they just kind of like it's this thing, and then they don't really get into the specifics. And there's a certain value to that because you're not like getting too deep into it. But when we were driving yesterday, we were talking about the line where the humans blow their EMP and they knock out some of the spiders' radio waves. And the line in the book is that like because it's biotechnology and because it is built to die, they have backups waiting to come in. Everything regenerates like shark's teeth just waiting in their row. And like that was so good. And it's like such an interesting point of view to like really get into what the technology could be for something that is not human like. Because I am definitely guilty of, and I've probably said it on the show before, I think that if we run into a spacefaring civilization, I think that they will be somewhat Earth-like. And I'm not necessarily human-like, but Earth-like. And like, I guess that is what spiders are, right? They are Earth-like. And so I guess that's still vindicated. But the spider's experience is so significantly different from ours that it creates, you know, like they felt so weird about going into hallways, you know, and they were talking everything's at 90-degree angles.
It does not look like nature at all.
Yeah. That was great. I mean, like, of course, that would be bizarre to something like that, you know, that is used to living in like a three-dimensional space in a different way than we are. So.
I loved the character, the AI / human / whatever crazy Dr. Kern.
Yeah.
I loved her evolution, you know, just what part of her is human and what part of her is the machine, and I just never even knew what was going on with her, but she was in denial about her monkeys, you know, and clinging, just so convinced that those were her monkeys, and everything, you know, went right, and that's what she's protecting. But she held on to that and let her expectations color reality so much that it really hindered the ability for them to all progress forward more quickly. I loved watching her progression and
Mhm.
her changing her understanding and then, you know, being able to integrate into their society eventually.
Yeah.
I also love, again, and I've mentioned this all 3 weeks, how the human storylines and the spider storylines parallel.
Mhm.
So there was that side of it, but also Holston trying to figure out, you know, what this message was that he was receiving, because he went into it with an expectation
Mhm.
that, you know, this is Kern or this is Empire C or
Right.
there's nothing down there that can communicate with us.
Mhm.
He went into it with that expectation. It slowed down his ability to actually understand the communications that were coming to the ship from the planet. And so there was this great lesson in there that if you go into the unknown with preconceived notions and expectations of how things should be, you're limiting your ability to actually understand the whole picture,
Mhm.
and you're slowing your own self down.
Yeah.
And I thought that was just, it was just a really, that's a great lesson in life to have. You know, don't let your expectations hold you back.
Mhm.
You know, and just what a beautiful way that it was incorporated into the story, and it's also very like scientifically important,
Yeah.
right? One of the early scientists, and I don't think it was Bacon, but I don't remember who it was, but he talked about how our senses get in the way of us understanding reality.
Mhm.
And they were like idols of the tribe and idols of the marketplace, and there was a couple other ones, but it reminded me all of that stuff. And I just, that was like one of the little pieces that I was like washing my hair and thinking about,
Yeah.
you know, like it was just resonating around in my brain, and,
Yeah.
and I loved it.
You know, and I think I feel like maybe we talked about this in an earlier week, but you know, what if there is something out there that doesn't perceive things in the same way, right? So they're not like looking for rays of light because like light doesn't matter to them,
Yeah.
you know. And so because they don't do light, maybe they're not really doing radio waves or you know or whatever. And I think all that's very interesting. Um, one of the other, well, I'll get to that in a second, I guess. I've lost it now. That's okay. But yeah, expecting things to be the same way, yeah, it really does hinder that. One thing I wish the book had gotten into, and it doesn't, is it is highly unlikely that the spiders were using like base 10 for their math. And so they're getting these like math problems essentially. And I'm not a math person, so like, what do I know? But, you know, they were able to figure out the math. But I would have loved to have like a small discussion of how the math, how the coming to the answer was somewhat different, right?
Yeah.
Because like you can send back like 10,000 and spiders would have a 10,000, but it wouldn't be notated in the same way, right? They probably have like a base 8 if anything, which is bizarre, but because they have 8 legs. And so you know, I don't know. How would a spider count, right? But it would not be 10. It just wouldn't be. And so what does that look like and how does that conversation, you know, happen? And I just thought that would have been fun,
Yeah.
right? Because that could possibly get in the way of trying to discover each other's like mathematical language, you know.
But scientists are pretty convinced that if there is any consistent way of communicating across the galaxy, that it is numerically.
Sure, yeah.
And so we do send out lots, you know, our messages that are on our little satellites and stuff, and all the messages that we're pinging out are all numerical.
Well, you know, but it just comes down to notation, right? And this is something that I think that they talk about in Three Body was like, there's no reason that a positive is positive and a negative is negative. What's important is the relationship between the two. And so, like, what if they just notated it differently, right?
Right.
Like, there are some cultures on Earth that whenever we talk about depth, we think of that as a minus, but they talk about depth as a height. It's just their like just the zero became lower, basically. And so like it would be interesting to have kind of like that conversation.
And that's, so we kind of saw Holston doing that with language. What we're talking about, what the process would have to be with numbers, right? It's not that the numbers mean the same thing, it's that the patterns and what they represent, the difference between those things are the same, and so you can correlate them. And Holston was doing that with language, right? And it just took a really long time because he's like, okay, I'm seeing this over and over, and I'm seeing this over and over, and when we see this over and over, it means this.
Right. Well, so yeah, and so I guess that does kind of come into the point I wanted to make about like language, and this is something I thought about last night while we were driving was, the spiders have like this understanding that they can literally pass to each other, right? And so even if there is a their language is always kind of underdeveloped, right? Like they do have like the vibration language, which still seems to be a bit of a struggle, but their reading and their like other languages is always lacking. And part of why it's lacking is because like they're not built for that. But the other reason it's lacking is because they just don't have to have it,
Mm-hmm.
because they can literally pass these understandings from one person to another. And we were talking about that scene. I think it's from last week where somebody's doing the sculpture of like one of the original Porsches or something, and they talk about how like this silk thing keeps changing and moving, and I got to thinking about what would art look like in different societies, but then I got to thinking about what would art look like in a telepathic society where I could just give Nicole an idea, and would they even have art? And I think that they would, but like what would telepathic art look like, and how could you give someone, like the joke I was making was, like Jason's landscapes are the best, right? Because he can give me this landscape idea, but it's just so beautiful and the symmetry is perfect or whatever. And I think that'd be really interesting, like what does art look like for a spider society? And I'm glad that that piece was included. It was very cool.
Yeah.
Peggy said, I was so worried that she was going even nuttier, uh, but her just being supportive and a bridge was a nice end. Oh, I want to say something about that. I also expected Holston to make the big translating discovery, but it never came. I am glad that it never came, because if he had discovered and cracked the spider code as they were invading the ship, that would have been lazy, and I'm not here for it. Right? Anytime there's a story where there's like, oh, we figured it out.
And I
Just in time.
loved that tension of us not knowing what the spider's plan was. And for a moment, just thinking they were just ripping people apart and killing everybody.
Yeah.
Like that was a great
Mm-hmm.
just emotional
Yeah.
investment.
Well, and then when Karst comes back and you're like what? He's like, what if he's a husk, just like the spider, right? You're like, oh, like that could happen. Yeah, that was fantastic. But like I'm glad that the spiders figured it out, right? Because in the end, like even though this is a story of humanity, it's really like the story of the spiders, I think, right? Like and in the end you kind of like realize that. And for them to be the ones to figure it out, I love it. Also makes sense because like they had more resources at their disposal. They had the technology to do it, and they had Kern who could help them sort of figure it out. And I don't, and like this sounds weird, but it would almost be patronizing to have them not figured out, and it had to be us, right? And the whole point is that they are us. The whole point is that they are um, just as intelligent or just as sentient as we are. And so allowing, if we had stolen that from them and had the humans figure out the solution, it would have taken some element of agency from them, I think.
Yeah. Well, and one of my favorite lines had to do with the fact that humans are the creators, but spiders are builders.
Right.
And that's where the power is, right?
Yeah.
And man, combine those two together, and
yeah.
what an amazing civilization.
Yeah. Well, and they see everything as a problem to be solved, right? And not just something to be destroyed. Now, that being said, when the humans show up and they start blasting, I think they made the right decision. I really do. Like taking the time to like alert the laser satellite, like, hey, we're here. Are you cool? They know it's not cool, right? There is no reason to suspect that that thing has improved itself in the last several thousand years.
Yeah.
And so destroying it out the gate, I think, is absolutely the right move. And then again, we have sort of that problem from Three Body, right? They get this hilarious prisoner's dilemma, like misinterpretation, which I thought was really funny. But all things considered, when it's the survival of your species, start blasting. And I hate that I think that that's the right answer, but for them it was. And what the spiders did was, I think, also the right answer, but a riskier answer than maybe what it could have been. They could have also started blasting, but they did not want to, right? They had learned from the ants, and they had realized we can take an enemy and turn it into a tool on some level.
Another kind of comparison to Three Body, every time it talked about like this new thing that the ants were able to do, that the ants were the computer, it made me think of in Three Body in the game when they're like flags and these are the computers.
And I thought about that the most when Kern becomes an ant colony, right? Because you say, well, what is human, or what is she really? And like I don't know the answer to that, but at the end she is an ant colony.
Yeah.
And that'd be like if you just took millions and millions of people and had them replicate a person. Yeah. That was fantastic. I really enjoyed that piece.
Yeah.
So then one thing that I also thought about in this whole thing where the spiders are taking the bit of the nanovirus that recognizes like for like basically, and they inject that into humans so that the humans then treat each other more peacefully and the spiders more peacefully. I think about what a tragedy it is that the ancient empire had created this technology and put it on a spaceship so they could send it out and shoot up monkeys with it and hadn't thought or apparently bothered to take that bit of the virus that the spiders took and shoot it into themselves so that they could look at all of their brothers and sisters on their own planet and realize like, oh, we're the same thing. We don't need to be killing each other. I'm like, what a shame that is, and that it never even crossed their minds.
But if ancient empire is anything as obstinate as what like we are today, I mean, look how hard it was to get everyone a flu shot, COVID shot.
Yeah,
like no one's gonna willingly take this nano shot.
I'm fine with that. I didn't say willingly. I don't care if you are willing.
But yeah,
line up. Yeah.
I mean, man, if we could have. So this is another really great lesson in this book, right? That like empathy is the savior of humanity, right? That is the key.
Yeah.
If you can empathize with everybody else, then you're not going to harm them.
Yeah.
You're not going to be a jerk.
Yeah.
And so, it was told in the story through this, inject the empathy thing. But really and truly, one of the big keys to enhancing or increasing empathy in the masses is reading books.
Oh,
Did
all
you
the
know?
books.
Did you know?
We've been talking about putting some banned books on the show and reading those on purpose.
Which wouldn't be hard.
It would not be hard.
When you really look at the list of books that have been banned throughout time, I mean, it's just absurd.
Yeah, it's a real shame. It really is. But yeah,
ridiculous.
There are actual problems out there, right? And
this is an actual problem because it leads to other problems.
Well, but yeah. But also, like, books have ideas, and ideas are contagious, right? Like, and talking about like being able to spread like the nanovirus and stuff like that, aren't ideas in some way like a nanovirus, right?
Yeah.
And I think I've talked about that on the show before, where I have this idea that physics creates chemistry, and chemistry creates biology, and biology makes technology, and ideas on some level are technology, and they're like little bits of DNA that move through our brains, and they evolve in different people's brains, and will become something else, and so. Ideas are dangerous, but they're only dangerous to the people who are in power. I want to come back to the empathy thing real quick because I thought about that this morning. Was if we were, I love zombie shows. My dog loves zombie shows. We watch zombie shows together.
I don't watch zombie shows.
And so, you have all these shows where like two groups of people run into each other in an abandoned city or in the forest or whatever, right? And then what do? Do you welcome them in because they might slit your throat in the middle of the night and take all your stuff? Or do you start blasting? We don't have to have this confrontation between humanity and spiders in space to ask that question. And the real me does like everything I can to be nice to everybody. And like if there's anything people generally say about me, it's that I like, oh yeah, he's a nice guy, right? And like that's what I want to be. But if it was a zombie apocalypse and I don't know you, what is the right choice, right? And is it empathy or to start blasting? And I don't know, right? Because in many cases, the empathetic die, right? There is a reason that humans are not more empathetic, right? Mm-hmm. It is because those who were overly empathetic didn't make it, right? There's a reason we don't look that way. Mm-hmm. And that's a tough question, It's hard.
I just want to make sure we acknowledge Peggy's other comment, Fabian's sacrifice, and Kern's words to him.
What were the words? I don't remember exactly.
I think it had to do with like, along this path to progression. I don't know, Peggy, you can.
I feel like she was like, I understand, like she kind of gave him the go ahead or something. Yeah, I do remember that barely.
Yeah. And then Peggy laughed at them using base 8.
Well, because base 8 is a nightmare. There's no reason to do that.
Peggy's a math person. She might have some more to say.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah.
She's a math whiz, man.
If you had to make a guess, Peggy, what style of math are spiders using? I just had an idea, but I'm gonna think about it a little bit more before I say it.
While she's typing, uh, towards the, or at the end of the book, when oh, wait, yeah, before we even get there, some things that like just shooketh me. I had to like come in here and make a face at Jason while I was reading on Sunday when we learned that Holston and Lane had
Have
an
a kid.
embryo.
Yeah.
Peggy had to teach base 5, base 2, and base 8 in Nigeria. So dumb.
Oh. There you go.
So yeah, so the fact that they had a kid, I was just like, oh my yes,
Yeah.
And then watching Lane and Holston grow old, but not together.
Yeah.
It was their bond really just touched me.
It was a love story I did not expect that was like stunted and malformed and beautiful all at the same time. And I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And one thing that they allude to, but I don't think we really get a good handle on, is this story takes place over thousands of years, right? For Lane, this story takes place over, let's say, 40 years. For Holston, this story takes place over the course of like 2 or 3 years, right? Like,
yeah,
of like actual conscious time. It might be less because they like bring him out to do stuff and then they stick him back in there, and there's no indication that the amount of time he's ever awake is something like really significant. And like, how jarring must that be? Because like, we understand that the clock has been ticking, so he will wake up to somebody new, and he understands that. But for it to actually happen to you has got to be, I mean, it's got to be terrible.
Yeah, and he even thinks about that at some point, just how jarring it is, and when he's trying to put the pieces all back together, at some point he just there's just memories in a bucket, but you can't line them all up.
So you leave Earth, right? And you're like, okay, cool, this is our first day, let's go to sleep. And then you wake up that night, and it's 2,000 years later, and there's this insane satellite trying to destroy you, and then you get kidnapped, and then you go down to this planet, and that's like 3 days, right? And then they're like, all right, you're going back to sleep, right? So you've been kidnapped for 3 days.
Can you even let me process this trauma before I go back to
And then
sleep?
you wake up over a fungus planet, and they let you be awake for like 10 hours, right? And you're looking at the fungus planet, and they're like, all right, man, go back to sleep, right? And you're like, okay, whew. I've just been kidnapped, looked at this fungus planet. Then you wake up, and then you're kidnapped again, right? And this is like 3 or 4 days now, and there's a crazy mechanical god person and subhuman things running around, and then you wake up again, and you're being invaded by spiders. That's a great week, right? No, thank you. How terrible.
Yeah. And he also got attacked by the spider. He survived a spider attack down on the planet. And, yeah, he was one of the crew that went down. Crazy. So yeah, I loved their little their connection, and I love that he was able to carry her off of the Gilgamesh and lay her in the grass so she could feel the grass and look up into the sky, and that really gave me all the feels. And then I also love that the ant human generation that's ready to go out into space and go after the new beacon of life that they're seeing. That they named their ship the Voyager. Yeah, I was all up in the feels.
Well, and that's like Holston Lane's also like great granddaughter maybe or something like that who's going. And it's such a perfect, I'm not one for happy endings because I think happy endings are few and far between. But this is a happy ending that I feel like in the context of the story makes perfect sense. There was no out of nowhere. You have a symbiosis not only of the spiders and their society, and not only the humans in their society, but like you have this like bud of Kern, who is also like really the ship's operating system, and how they were all able to come together to pull all that off. I just think is so cool, and all like the weird little bits and pieces of technology that were combined to make that happen.
And it's not like this book had this like hunky-dory happy ending and there were no troubles. There was considerable loss of life, and what the generations of humans had to go through to get to this point. It was not easy. This wasn't just, we're going to space and we're going to make a new life and everything's great. I mean, it was kind of terrible. But, just, it was just so beautiful.
Yeah, it was good.
Just loved it so much. I love thinking about the potential that that if we can be reasonable and we can be hardworking and
Right.
we can work together, and we can allow reality to exist and not color reality with our expectations, but be prepared,
Right.
and be problem solvers like the spiders.
Right.
If we can do all of those things, the potential of our future is
Right.
unlimited.
Right.
And I also loved that last little chapter was called To Boldly Go.
What a sucker for Star.
Yeah. Beautiful. I'm just verklempt.
Peggy says, one thing I saw towards the end was the idea of more progressed thinking. Bianca reflects that she was standing on the backs of giants where Kern looked down on her nose at those giants.
Yeah.
I definitely agree. And you're absolutely right about like the potential of things. And I am also fascinated by the potential. And while I have said we have made it this far because like those who were extremely empathetic didn't make it, the flip side is also true. We have made it to this point because empathy has. We are inherently a social species, right? If it was only like the marauders and the raiders who ever bred, we would not be able to live like this. Like we just wouldn't. And I think back on all the things that have happened in history where people are like, that's dumb. This is going to destroy things, right? Whether that be letting minorities vote or women vote or letting people vote at all, right? Or saying that different people can get married or like teaching people to read, right? And like or like when people couldn't read the Bible because if you let people read the Bible, nonsense is going to happen, right? Like all kinds of crazy stuff that like then we did it and then we're like, oh, it wasn't that bad,
Right?
And how much? And so here I am saying like, I think the first strike is the right move, but how much of that is just because we haven't yet progressed and tried the next thing and then learn? I also think that in this case, like if you wanted to live this way, the best offense is actually good defense instead of the other way around, which I think is actually something they said in the book is, the best defense is a good offense. I think Karst says that. And of course, we've heard that all over the place, right? But when you can defeat whatever threat might come up to you, you don't have to first strike because you know that like, well, if they're hostile, we can survive it. And if they're hostile, maybe we can survive it indefinitely until they are no longer hostile, right? Like there's a certain amount of value to that, to being able to resist a first strike, I suppose. Peggy says, we're also stunted as a society because those with abilities are kept by those with power or abilities are hidden to keep power. Yeah. Yeah.
I think I was thinking that too. That like, think about the lack of empathy in some of the leaders or groups that have led to loss of technology and loss of information in the dark ages and all the ways that we're hindered by those in power who refuse to acknowledge that people are just people.
Yeah. Yeah. We say that too, and we had this conversation yesterday as well. That I think there's like a small plot hole here, in that I am not convinced that Spider Society could have evolved with the inequality towards males like it did, because every female would have in them some inherited understanding from their male predecessors, and they would not have any memory of them being like eaten, because that would happen after the mating actually happens, right? And so like you don't have that terror, but you would have like the hard life and like the mistreatment, and that would somehow be built into you where like, oh, this guy was like semi-intelligent and nobody ever gave him a chance, right? Like you would have that in there. And so the fact, and they kind of acknowledge, right? One of the Fabians tells one of the Porsches, like, this. And so maybe that's an allusion to that. But I think, being able to have somebody else's memories, of course, makes you more empathetic to them, and so I'm just not convinced that we still have this inequality, right? We still have this inability to see something as ourselves. But I'm not sure that would have actually happened in like a real scenario.
But I mean, it also, like, I do agree with your point, but just to kind of counter it a little bit, it does go to show, again, just like when you have power, how much that can color reality.
Yeah, sure.
You choose to see what you want to see, and you don't want to lose your power.
Sure. Well, whenever you're a man and you say, well, hey, maybe we should let women vote, right? If half the population is women, now your vote is half as valuable, right? Like you are taking away your own power.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, what's best for me versus what's best for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the catch, right? Like, and that's the prisoner's dilemma, right?
Mm-hmm.
That is like literally the prisoner's dilemma.
Right.
And if I choose the us and you choose the me, well, then I lose.
Yeah.
So it's tough one. Tough one. And one of the other things that I think he said was that if the spiders had the prisoner's dilemma, they would have found the idea that they could have not communicated with each other like totally unacceptable, right?
Yeah.
Right. I really enjoyed that part, right? Like because the problem isn't do I betray this person or do I take a move that is more like in solidarity? The question was, I need to ask this guy what we're like. Oh, I need to communicate what the plan is, right? Why is that not the option? So, I really enjoyed that bit.
Yeah, this author did a really great job of telling the story of two civilizations,
Mm-hmm.
in just a way that you could buy into immediately. I mean, I'm like, whoa, they're spiders?
Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh, these are my spiders. Like,
Right.
these are my people.
Right.
I'm Team Spider.
Yeah.
I mean, immediately. And it wasn't all so technical that I couldn't enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
But there was enough information that I've definitely learned more about spiders because all I knew about spiders previously I had learned from Charlotte's Web.
Yeah.
And that was it.
You know what I want to know more about? Stomatopods. What's going on over there?
Yeah, there were a couple of things I looked up and it didn't exist, and I was like, oh, or like Wikipedia didn't have an entry for it.
Oh, stomatopods was one?
I don't remember.
I feel like
something OPs or something.
Yeah, that's like kind of like a crustacean, if I'm not mistaken, or like a
big old shrimp. Oh, the shrimp are down there watching TV, like watching the takeoff of the Voyager or whatever. What a cool society.
Yeah.
And I like the idea that like their the spider architecture, is natural.
Yeah. I like that the spaceship was like in a weird way a living organism.
And it like adapted itself to be most efficiently shaped for leaving orbit.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I think, there's kind of like this trope that like quietly runs throughout sci-fi of like space whales, of like just these big behemoth things that like float in space between planets, and I think that idea is really interesting because I'm not convinced it's possible. But like, what do I know, right? Like, what do I know? And that is kind of a space whale, right? Like this thing that they designed to that didn't like evolve to live in space, but has been designed to live in space and then like spit out something on a planet. So I imagine that they get to their destination and it like opens its mouth and then they like shoot their little spaceships out. Yeah.
Wow.
It's kind of fun.
When you said something about space whales, it just made me think of like So Long and Thanks for All the Fish and like the dolphins in space.
Yeah.
And, I don't know. Anyway, what was that called?
That is
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's the one.
Yep. So yeah, let's see.
I think I've said all the things that I wanted to say.
Yeah, I think I have to.
Fantastic book, big fan, recommend it to everyone.
So good.
Yeah. Even for people who don't like sci-fi, I've been like, they're like, I don't read sci-fi. Well, you're gonna read this, right? Like this is good. Yeah. And I didn't really like. I guess I felt the sci-fi throughout, but like it wasn't not in the same way because so much, and maybe because like so much of the technology we were dealing with was organic, and that makes me feel differently about everything. I think, and I'm not sure why.
Just a couple more thoughts.
Yeah.
They don't even really need to be said, but just a few. I just want to say it so that I can say.
That's why the people are here.
But just living on the ship living on the Gilgamesh towards the end of its days. It's just been scrapped and patched and pieced, and there's holes in weird places, and this poor ship that was never intended to hold this many people, and was not intended to like be in space this long, and how it's just like Holston saw it as this is the vessel to get us from where we came from to where we're going, but like Alpash
saw it as home.
It was home for them and thousands of other people, or however many people it was. The amount of difference between the humans on this ship was incredible. And that's also something that we saw in Three Body, that once you are one who has been born in space,
Yeah.
you are different from an Earthling.
Right. Well, so one of the books that one of our viewers keeps recommending to us, it's actually a whole series that I think is being recommended to us, is The Expanse, which is a show that we have started and never finished. But like they have the spacers or the asteroid people. I can't remember what they're called, right? But like, and they are like physiologically different, right? And but there's plenty of stories, right? They find these old like derelict terraforming stations and things like that, and derelict ships are kind of a staple of sci-fi. But having a ship that is just continued on, and just like falling apart is something like that's a little rare. I think it's something I'm not really used to, and I just absolutely love that story. Right, this thing just becoming more and more decrepit as it goes, because so many ships leave their solar system and then arrive at their destination in like basically pristine condition.
Yeah.
Like what were the Trisolaran ships like whenever they finally showed up? Right, were they like wrecked or like what's the deal? Nobody really talks about that, so I enjoyed that a lot.
So that was that, and then there was one other thing I wanted to mention too that I liked. I don't remember. It'll come up in a comment.
Fair enough.
Yeah. This is just an incredible book. I'm so glad that we read it.
Yeah.
I was not super pumped going into it, just because I wasn't sure, what it was, and Three Body, while amazing, was not a very hopeful look of the future, just because it went all the way then. all the way.
Yeah.
And then the other one, not Children of Time, Childhood's End, was kind of a bummer.
It was kind of hopeful. I don't know. I found both of those to be beautiful and kind of hopeful. I don't know.
But this one was just different.
Yeah.
This one was great. I liked both the other ones for their own reasons.
Sure.
I can't quite say
this one
I
is more
liked
accessible.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, Childhood's End, not bad, but definitely interesting. So, this is one that I follow several like science fiction YouTube channels, Quinn's Ideas, and a couple other ones. And some of those folks have had videos about this book, and I have been avoiding them because I've known that it was like on the list. But it's definitely one that we hit because it was on the list, and like we're trying to hit the things that have been on the list for a while. Like, let's get through those. But like, man,
some every once in a while, and I can't quite pinpoint why, but I was thinking of Ender's Game a little bit while we read this.
Yeah.
And maybe just because the style of creature, with the spiders were
bugs.
And it makes me wonder, what was that civilization like that was destroyed in Ender's Game, because we didn't really get to see it.
Yeah. That's a good point. It's literally the same problem, right? We cannot communicate. I mean, they did try to destroy us, right? That's part of the story. Is the first Formic War was the aliens invading us, but like it comes down to the same problem. And all these other stories we're talking about, like we kind of do the flip side where we strike first, but that was one where they struck first. Yeah. Okay. Continue. I'm sorry.
Oh no, that was it. It was just.
If you have not read,
making me thinking about it.
Yeah, if you have not read Ender's Game, I would highly suggest it. Maybe we can do that as one of the, except for those we have, fairly soon, because it's not just one book; it's really several, and the later ones aren't as good.
Well, and reading Ender's Game was interesting, but it made me really want to read the one where he goes on the journey to make peace with.
Yeah, Speaker for the Dead.
Yeah, that's one I really want to read. I think.
That's a good one.
Or just one summary of.
Yeah. Orson Scott Card, it has like so many like very interesting science fiction ones. There's another one, I can't remember the name of this one, but I've been thinking about it a lot with Kern, where Kern could not tell like if she was a human or a computer or anything else. If anybody knows, y'all can tell me what the title of the series is, but it's this story where Earth is ruined and these people leave and they go to this other planet and they embed themselves in this planet and they make this computer that is a god. And they don't know that it's a computer, like the descendants in the future. And they just know that there's this God. But the computer cannot see itself. And so it does not know where it is on the planet. And so it like gets somebody, and there's like this kind of like heresy aspect to it, I think, where it convinces somebody like you need to be the prophet that leads people to find me. And then I have to get fixed, so we have to go back to Earth. And I kind of got that vibe with Kern here a little bit. So But I mean, all sci-fi only has so many ideas, right? And so the idea is
Yeah.
how do you mix them together? You know,
Yeah.
there was some Star Trek references here. There was definitely some things that were very similar, I think, to Three Body.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, but just a different take.
Yeah.
You know. Another neat point that I liked in this book was, you had these like Lane and Holston and what was the guy that like dissolved into the machinery, uploaded his brain.
Going.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you have all these guys who have become the gods of the generation that was born,
Yeah.
and then their descendants born on the ship. And then Guyan is gone, but Lane was still asleep and Holston was still asleep.
Right.
Well, when they start waking these people up, these great grandchildren are like, these are like our mythology, you
Right,
know. But
yeah.
you're standing right next to him, and then you're like, oh, you're kind of useless,
Right.
You know? So,
Well, I think Holston actually has that thought, right? He's
Yeah.
like, I wonder what myth cycles there are about me.
yeah, and it kind of sucks to outlive your legacy.
Yeah.
You know?
You don't want to meet your heroes, right?
Yeah.
Whenever Goyen goes and tries to become a space god, you're like, oh god, this is gross, right? And then Kern does the same thing, and then by the end of it, Karst, Lane, Holston, they're all space gods.
Yeah.
But they're just like more benevolent deities than the others might have been.
Well, and like was Guyen's intentions? It sounded like they were rooted in what he thought was the best thing to do.
Insanity and I mean, like yes, he thought it was the best, but he was also insane.
Yeah.
Those things don't have to be exclusive, Yeah, I mean.
Because, like, from Holston's point of view, which is kind of where we saw everything, he's like, okay, I hear Vitas and I hear Lane, but then I hear Guyen.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay, we can do the last thought. Then we're approaching an hour. We need to read some comments. But my last thought is, we kind of get like these little drips throughout the story of how Vitas is terrified of spiders, and then we have Vitas's death. I guess I don't know if Vitas lives or not, right?
Well, surely they weren't killing; they were injecting.
Yeah, I don't know, right? But we don't actually.
We don't see her.
We don't actually come back to what was going on with like the people having their seizures on the floor. Like it's implied. That was the nanovirus.
The nanovirus.
But I mean, I loved the element of terror that was in some of parts of this story, right? And Vitas was that was a good one.
Poor Vitas.
That was actually one of the few parts of the book that I listened to on audio tape, and that was.
Yeah, and I kind of hope for Vitas in a way that maybe she died in that encounter, because for her to have to come back from that, she's gonna have some trauma.
Yeah.
Just because she was so scared of him, even though she has the nanovirus now, she would still remember that fear that she felt. Poor thing.
Yeah.
That was rough.
All right, so Peggy says, so glad I read this. I make too many spider references now, but whatever. Yesterday I told someone I raised my front leg at a male. Today I told someone to make a man dance for her. I love it. Greg says that he'd love to read Speaker for the Dead with us. And I'm not opposed, right? So the idea behind books we never read was originally supposed to be that as long as one of us had not read the book, that we would read it. And Speaker for the Dead qualifies because
so
Nicole has not read it.
Neither of us have read it.
Correct. Now, I will say this: I started Orson Scott Card when I was probably way too young, and like I don't think I really appreciated it. Ender's Game is kind of pitched as a children's book, and it is not. And Orson does not think of it as a children's book either. And going back as an adult, like you really you get something different out of it, I think. And like one of the things you get as a kid is like you feel like they're heroes, but they're not heroes. And then one of the things you get as an adult is that they are victims, but they are not victims.
Right.
They are monsters.
Yeah.
Those children are monsters, and they are made to be that way. And it's one of those things where like you're not really supposed to feel bad for them because like they are doing a necessary job to save humanity or whatever, right? Whether or not you think turning children into generals is necessary, I suppose it's up to interpretation. But yeah. Greg says, except for those we have for Ender's Game and books we never read. Yeah, there we go. Would be fun. Yeah. So maybe that's the thing, right? If we're gonna do an except for those we have, if we're gonna read Speaker for the Dead, we should first do an except for those we have for Ender's Game, and then of course like let people know maybe well ahead of time. Read the book we're reading now, but if you want to read Ender's Game on the side, or even the movie is fantastic. They did a really good job.
Yeah.
Really good.
Yeah.
and it's an easy read. There's really nothing to Ender's Game. It's pretty straightforward.
Mhm.
So, cool. Well, guys, I think that's about it for us.
Hey, that was good.
It was
For
so
me
good.
to have had no notes.
Yeah, we came in basically solo today.
I jotted a couple of things down in the minute that the YouTube was rendering our video, our
Yeah.
live.
We appreciate everybody being here this morning. This was a great chat. I think this was a lot of fun. I just want to generally remind everybody that our next book is The Flanders Panel by Arturo Revez Perterte. I can't remember. Something like that.
I thought it was Perez.
Reverte.
Reverte. There you go.
So go ahead and pick that
Sorry,
up.
Mr. Reverte.
We will be doing a live in just a few minutes, going through exactly what it is that we're going to put for our syllabus, just because that's how it is. You don't have to be there for that. And then we'll begin on that. My understanding is it's kind of like Dan Brown, so we're going to go back to just like a basic hop across the globe mystery thrillers.
Dan Cosmic Brownie.
What is that? What I said the other day? I told her that I thought this book
Dan
was.
Brownie.
I thought it was Dan Brownie. We call him Dan Cosmic Brownie now.
Cosmic Brownie. Anyway.
All right. Thank you so much for being here for this one. We had a blast. We will see y'all next week for our first reading of the Flanders Panel.
Happy reading.
Bye.
Wait.
Whoa.
This day. No, this week in literary history.
Yeah.
Hold up. I've got some information for you. There's some births and some deaths that are interesting. L. Frank Baum, writer of Wizard of Oz. He was born tomorrow in 1856, which is fun because in the book I kept thinking like, don't look behind the curtain, just like these fake gods and just humans being idiots but being seen as gods. Anyway, so there's that. Emily Dickinson died tomorrow in 1886. Amazing poet. And a couple of other fun ones. Lorraine Hansberry, Raisin in the Sun. She was born in 1930 on the 19th. And Nathaniel Hawthorne, Scarlet Letter, also a great read, died on May 19th, 1864.
Wow. This is something Nicole wants to start doing, so y'all be ready for this.
If anyone's left. Bye.